Welcome to our latest episode of The Technocrats.
My name is Deepak Mittal. I'm the founder and CEO of NextGen Invent. NextGen Invent is a technology and data science services company, which specializes in the healthcare supply chain and manufacturing industry. It has four different practices: AI and automation, data analytics, custom product development, IT advisory services. And today, we are actually going to dive into the patient engagement and remote patient monitoring details and how AI trends are reshaping these two services. We will also be discussing what challenges are actually there in integrating the AI solutions and technologies to enhance the patient care through to improve actually the patient engagement and remote patient monitoring. And for this, we actually have today with a good friend of mine and NextGen Invent advisor, Mr. Gennaro Maida. Welcome, Gennaro. And just to give a little bit of his background, he's a seasoned senior C executive with a remarkable background spanning over 20 years in biomedical engineering, technology, medicine, and data science. Throughout his career, Mr. Maida has been instrumental in ushering the next generation of medical solutions, leveraging the power of data science and real-time biometrics. His expertise extends beyond the broad boardroom as he actively serves in advisory roles, propelling health tech startups to unprecedented heights. He is recognized as one of the top 100 healthcare visionaries by the International Forum for the Advancement of Healthcare. Mr. Maida continues to make waves in this industry, and I'm so privileged to have you, Mr. Maida, with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. I appreciate the introduction. You make me sound much smarter than I am. And I want to thank all the guests for joining us as well. It's great to see so many people online.
Oh, appreciate that. So we will actually dive into the discussion itself also. As you know, Gennaro, that the AI healthcare market was valued about $16 billion in 2022. And it is actually expected to grow at a CAGR of 40%, which is quite something in itself, to reach $173 billion by 2029. Interestingly, also, the Gen AI-based companies have made waves by becoming actually more unicorns in 2023. So AI-powered chatbot, generative AI, VR, all those things are actually changing how personalized patient engagement and support is actually being provided. With that in mind, could you please help us understand what are the key AI trends which are reshaping patient engagement and remote patient monitoring?
Sure, absolutely. It's a great question. I'd like to touch lightly on what's changed in some of the models that are out there now. Being able to look at what they call multimodal data now, being able to look at images, video, audio, and language, and being trained on huge data sets allows the models to actually see nuances that weren't there before and be able to take in data of different sizes and different structures, and you can summarize, translate, and even generate new text. Now, being able to apply this to medicine is where it gets really interesting. Back in the 40s and 50s, my grandfather used to go door to door with his little black bag, and that's how he stayed on top of patients in between their visits. And most of your healthcare actually happens in between these discrete healthcare visits. And that's where the remote patient monitoring comes in and getting the support from these different models. As you know, there's 7 billion people on the planet now, and being able to stay on top of all of the patients is an impossible task for physicians. There's simply too much data and too many people. So being able to have what I like to call a level 1 support for the patients, for instance, if there's a patient that was told to have a low salt diet, and it turns out they have a halal diet, they can actually go on their chat GPT and say, look, I'm looking for a low salt diet. I don't like cauliflower, and I need a 7-day plan, and it's halal, and it can reply in real time with an output. Or if they're trying to use the remote patient monitoring, that can get pretty technical and they don't understand the instructions, they can ask, can you please simplify this for me? Or my son, who only speaks Spanish, can you please translate this for my son because he's the one who's technically adept to help me out? And you're able to see all of these different trends in the data, the nuances that we couldn't see before. For instance, a patient who is in a country at war is going to have different data than a patient who's in a country that's at peace. And the data can start to notice these little nuances, the different levels of stress, et cetera, that we couldn't see before to help the patient get more engaged and make better patient decisions.
And this is actually so helpful. So what you are actually telling us, Mr. Gennaro, is that if I'm actually an entrepreneur, if I thought that my product had all the features, I basically have already been given a long list of features which I can actually include in my product to improve actually the patient engagement. At the same time, I think what you are also alluding to is that the large corpus of the ChatGPT, the OpenAI large language models, I can actually use that. So I don't have to have all that data being available to me, but I can actually leverage it to enhance my products and services to do that. With that thought, actually, I would like to go a little bit deeper in what you just said, is that we talked about the AI trends and how it is reshaping. And in that is that what features, in my opinion, what features in patient engagement, which are interaction related with patients. So how these AI powered patient engagement platforms differ from the traditional platforms when it comes to how they enable the interactions of patients, between patient and provider and other places as well.
Sure, and anyone who's had an opportunity to use some of the automated phone lines of the past can see some of the hiccups. My fiance was online yesterday and asked, I need to speak with a customer service representative. And it said, so you're having a problem with your PIN number. And we've all dealt with that. Now, the new models have robust language processing and understanding. So a patient can directly interact with a chatbot and get feedback. A lot of times the discharge summary has a lot of information, and the chatbot can actually summarize what's in there. And you can actually ask it, can you please explain this step by step and give me examples of how I'm supposed to do this? My physician recommended that I find ways to relax. Can you give me recommendations on that? And then explain to me how I might learn how to do that. For instance, meditation, being able to get different types of meditation and understanding that and interact. Further, you can actually ask these chatbots, once they get to the point where you have the open source models for privacy and embedded in your healthcare data, you can ask questions about your health. How am I doing with my blood pressure? And the chatbot's able to look and see whether or not it's changing and say, hey, your blood pressure's actually dropped a little bit. You're doing well. Are you taking your medication? And you can have a little bit of an interaction back and forth so to improve the outcomes. With remote patient monitoring, there's a lot of different levels. Another example, there's a company out there with older patients and they get lonely. And the chatbot actually checks every now and then with the patient to see how they're doing to make them feel a little bit less lonely, because there's so many different levels of engagement. And we often forget that it starts with picking your health plan, then your provider, then going to the office and the interaction, the instructions, the medication, follow up with specialists, and a large amount of time in between the visits with the remote patient monitoring. And having opportunities for the patient to actually move from a passive role to an active role in their health, seeing that they can have a positive impact, makes a huge difference.
And this is actually so right on the money, in a sense, is that it seems like what you're saying is that I can actually interact with these AI models like I'm actually interacting with a human being, and 90% or actually more, it's many times that interaction is actually nonverbal. And instead of me reading 50 pages document, I can actually interact and ask questions so that my interactions are very more human-like. It seems like, and then I can actually not only work with the structured data, but the audio, video, and things of that nature to really improve the overall experience a patient can have. with this, actually, you probably might be thinking where I'm going with the next is that we talked about the AI, we talked about the features, but I think at the end of the day, this is actually the data, which is the oil around these things. If we talk about the data itself, how much data we use to actually generate through wearable devices and other sensors, it has grown a lot more now. And AI can actually use this data to identify anomalies, things of that nature. So in your opinion, if we talk about more remote patient monitoring, how this data which has been gathered, how that is actually being helpful in converting this data into insights or actions, which is not really which has a value to the whole healthcare system itself as well.
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with having the patient and the physician interactions as you're training these models. You have so much data now, making sure that we go in the right direction is of utmost importance. A company not too long ago, Babylon AI, came out with a product that said, if you give us the symptoms, we'll give you a diagnosis, and it didn't work out as well as they had hoped. And so it's very important to keep people in the loop as you're training and improving the models, and to make sure that they're fine-tuned on the right corpus of data. And what we're seeing right now with generative AI, they're general models. You can put in video, audio, images, as I said, and over time, we're starting to see large vision models come out that are focused on, say, images, and then you can fine tune them further, say, on x-rays of the lung, chest x-rays, and you can actually get better and better data. Sort of like, I like to think of it, what you see in the brain. You have language processing centers, video processing centers, and it's going to get better and better over time. And we're starting to see these models get smaller and smaller in size as they look at ways to encrypt them, and not encrypt, but compress them and improve them. So privacy is also, covered. It's actually a model that's embedded within, rather than what you see with ChatGPT that has a lot of outside access and storage of the data. But going through the training levels, the test and repeat, and having a physician look at the data, they tend to be more objective in the outputs looking at the data. And a patient, when they review the data, tends to be a bit more subjective on how they feel. And one of the really cool things that I like, and I've had a chance to work on, is using the generative AI to actually look at mood changes and sentiment changes in patient notes and patient diaries, and being able to detect, say, for PTSD, potential crises, so that they can get in touch with the correct qualified healthcare professional as needed. There's so many interesting areas to be able to work on right now. But first and foremost, you need to have the right people in place to make sure as the product grows, you're going in the right direction.
This is so true. Actually, to be frank, we basically published 13 pilots to actually show just the power of the generative AI in the customer engagement, patient engagement perspective. And whenever we basically had discussion with different CEOs while showing those pilots, so many ideas, so many features, and how they can actually use that and improve it, and what data actually it needs, and oh yeah, I have that data, or how basically plan for that data so that I can actually capture that market. All those things comes along. With that, always to us, we have found that it's not actually one feature like the patient, though a patient is actually in the center, but the ecosystem matters. And you and me were actually had a long discussion about this before, and I loved it, in a sense that the patient engagement is one part of the puzzle, and the other two bigger pieces itself are also the provider enablement and peer connect. And there was actually a report which was published by DHNY, which said that only 4% of the companies which were in patient engagement actually got the funding, while 16% of the companies which got the funding were actually related to the provider enablement. I would love to know actually as you are basically in the center of this, and you work all the three parties itself also, what your opinion on the same?
Well, there's a lot of work being done to engage everyone at all levels. First and foremost, you need payer engagement. You need a reimbursement strategy. And the payers like to have randomized clinical trials being able to look at the data and say, hey, this is something we want to cover, which actually ends up for startups, it's a bit of a difficult disconnect. But once the payers make money available, for instance, remote patient monitoring, they need to get the physician involved and get physician engagement. There it gets tricky. You're required to have 20 minutes of data review and a in-person interaction or video interaction with a patient. If you're a practice with 1,000 RPM patients, that's 20,000 minutes per month. Where do you get that time? Hiring new staff. And that gets to be a little bit difficult. So there ends up a lot of business questions as well. But when the physician has an opportunity to look at these different technologies and believe in them, that draws the patient in. And then they get to try them. And then the patient gets a chance to see the changes in their health. And then the patient gets engaged. And then it ends up being a bit of a feed forward mechanism. More patients want to try it. The physicians like it. The payer's able to reimburse. And they also all become an ecosystem helping each other. But it's a bit of a chicken egg, who goes first, who gets the right piece. And one of the difficulties is you see startups that are wonderful and coming up with incredible ideas. And I was working with one recently, walked into a pilot for 10 people. And the first question is, so where's your RCT data? Where's your randomized trial data? We're a startup trying to do a 10-person pilot just to get a start to build. And there's that valley of death between the pilots and building and raising the money. And it's tricky because there's so many incredible companies out there that have great ideas that physicians believe in, trying to get the payers involved to make these things a reality.
Absolutely. That basically brings to my other question is that, in my opinion, there is always two sides of the coin. And I think I should talk about the other side, the dark side of the coin as well. With Gemini, actually, we have all heard what actually happened here just a couple of days ago, and they basically said that Gemini will not produce the images anymore for the time being. So it basically highlights that the AI in the healthcare. If I'm an entrepreneur, or actually I'm basically managing a healthcare system, how should I mitigate the risk? How should I keep the patient safety at the top, avoid that data bias, which we keep hearing about?
And unfortunately, there's a lot of examples of how things can go wrong. We're looking right now at the Change Healthcare and the data breach, the ransomware that's affected quite a few people with their prescriptions. Babylon Health that overpromised and said it could do certain things and it wasn't able to. Gemini with the bias. And one of the things we need to do is really take a look from the beginning. When you're at the paper napkin idea, try to get people involved. Ask a couple clinicians, ask a couple software engineers, is this doable? And start building from scratch. You can't look at HIPAA compliance, GDPR compliance later. You need to start with that from the beginning. Take a look at what data you need down the road and build the right types of structures from the beginning. Pick the correct cloud advisors. There's a lot of research to be done at the beginning. Find yourself a partner that has experience in a lot of these areas so that you start off on the right foot and don't have to backtrack, which costs an extraordinarily larger amount of money. And at any point in this, you really need people in the loop. I have a lot of friends that are physicians that like to beat me up on different topics with AI and taking their jobs, this, that, and the other, and being able to treat the patients correctly and get the best data. And then I have software engineers on the other side say, hey, we can do all of this, and trying to find that balance and then test, repeat, and test and repeat, and slowly try it on larger and larger groups while you get the investors interested to bring money in as well.
Absolutely.
So it's a, step process.
Absolutely. And I think we basically have actually started using a lot of best practices from ISO 42001 as well, as you know, Gennaro, to kind of address some of these risk and concerns related to the AI itself as well. We are coming towards the end, and I'm going to, sorry, we started late, so I'm going to take another 5 more minutes because we lost that time. The one question actually comes always is that I did all that. I have actually a good solution. But the adoption is where the return on investment comes. What should I consider or be cautious about to increase the adoption of these AI solutions, which are actually really improving the patient engagement and also remote patient monitoring?
I think one of the things that what's going on is to be able to overcome the fear of some of these models, not only from the patient side, but also from the physician side. I saw a study not too long ago that said we can predict your death within 4 years at an 80% rate. Who on earth wants to know that? There's a lot of ethical questions that we need to come together as a whole and be able, there's a lot of thought exercises that need to go into this, being able to navigate these correctly. Not every patient wants to know every single thing about their health. And with all the genomic data, there's a lot of things that can be gleaned from it. And being able to bring the patient in there and customize it and personalize it for that patient. What do you want to know? But then the ethical question comes in, if we know this could happen to the patient, should we treat it anyway? And, and there's going to be debates on both sides of that. But getting the patients involved and moving from the passive to the active and asking them. For instance, I have a friend that runs a hospice locally, and he's been doing RPM for about 15 years, back since the Honeywell days. And he asks the patient right off the bat, how do you want to be contacted? How often do you want to be contacted? And then some of them may want the chatbot to be able to check on them. But realizing that there is that level of engagement from the patient, finding out what suits them best, and checking in on occasion, because that will change over time as well.
Absolutely. So to be frank, you are telling me that we should actually choose the right problem to solve, to improve the which matters. And also you kind of highlighted that incentives do matter, in a sense that if there are incentives for all the parties, of course, if there is a party to pay and the payers are actually saving money, providers are actually getting paid, then the patient also getting better healthcare outcomes, that will actually improve as well. We basically have also found that which you actually touched a little bit earlier also, is the alert fatigue, in a sense that you mentioned that patients should be actually contacted only once in a day, and you basically are trying to say that we should not contact them so often that it basically becomes a turn off than a turn on to the patients as well. So if I'm understanding it correctly, is that what you're trying to say as well?
Absolutely. And it's something that you see especially in mental health. When you're looking at a patient, say, let's say PTSD, for instance, and you start to give them voluminous amounts of surveys to do every day, and you're starting to say, hey, you have not filled out your survey today, and you start to bug them, that increases anxiety, and that has a direct effect on their PTSD. So not only can you push patients away, but you can also have a direct effect on their health through over engagement and being able to get.
So actually, we couldn't hear the last sentence you said. Could you please repeat that?
Oh, sure. Being able to get direct feedback from the patient is something that's of utmost.
Awesome. And just to add to that, what we have heard, Mr. Gennaro, is that there are actually 3 myths which basically comes into picture. And if we have addressed those myths in the beginning, there is actually much more wider adoption. In a sense, your IP and data will be taken away. No, it will not be taken away. If you will basically take the subscription, your data will be separate from the large corpus. Things of that nature. Will it hallucinate? How I cannot control it? Yes, you can control that hallucination also through the data structured data behind it, also to how it generates the data. Things of that nature. So I think discussing those myths and then knocking those down in the beginning itself will actually help in bringing all the parties together in the beginning and the end as well. With that said, we are actually towards the end. So we have only time left for just one last question, which is, if you want to give one takeaway, or if I'm basically listening to your to this live event, what one key takeaway you would like me to have from this live event?
And I think one of the most important things because I've heard it come up with a concern from physicians. There's always going to be people in the loop and physicians in the loop. 100 years from now, you're still going to want to have a physician to come in and tell you that a loved one passed away. I don't think that's going to change. Even when we watch the original Star Trek, tons of technology, but who's there? Dr. McCoy. You need somebody that's a little bit smarter than the AI to be able to orchestrate it all. ChatGPT can help you design a room, but you need an architect to look at the overall structure. And you have these primary care physicians and specialists that oversee everything. And having these tools can help them to become better physicians because they have better information. So, and we also look at having people in the loop throughout the whole training process early on, having the right data, then having it reviewed, and then having it reviewed by patients and physicians, and having the right companies in place to make sure you're going in the right direction. And having those people in the loop is always going to be something that's being there. And hopefully we can get back to some semblance of having my grandfather go door to door with his little bag, but using technology to helping people better health and, better engagement in their health.
Absolutely. I really, really appreciate you taking the time, Mr. Gennaro. And I would actually encourage everybody to basically post a question if they have any. We basically may be able to take one question. And in case if you would like us to answer your question in detail later, one of my team member is actually going to post a calendar link. Please use that link to schedule a 15-minute discussion offline with us, and we will be happy to help the healthcare community in general. All the innovation. I feel that there is so much vibe in this time, which has come from all the innovation throughout the world. Specifically, US is actually participating, and I live actually in New York, such a vibrant city. And General, you are actually in the heart of actually where a lot of new companies are actually signing up. So definitely, I would love to hear from you what you have to discuss. Our doors are open. And would love to actually just chat about what your experience has been and share our experience with you. With that, thank you very much, General.